All right, let's transition into a new topic. In this case, guys, we're talking about New World versus Final Fantasy XIV. This week alone, I think we were talking about earlier at the start of this week, how certain MMOs have synergies, where as WoW seemingly, we'll just put it that, hopefully politely, is collapsing under its own weight and own leadership in this regards. It's left a lot of like refugees coming and checking out of the games. Final Fantasy seems to be the game to play right now. Now, and somebody sent me, Zoila sent me a great little video somebody made of like this WoW player kind of trying to sleep, and in the back, a little backyard party of Final Fantasy people all having a good old time. I laughed my head off. But beyond that aspect, Guild Wars 2, ESO, like it seems like all these, like we're just seeing people come and check out other MMO RPGs right now. And one of the things I see is that, at least from the people I talk to, is that either they're already going in to play Final Fantasy XIV or they're waiting on New World.
Right.
And that's because New World is the next MMO to release, a really big MMO to release. Yep. Doesn't mean it's going to be successful, but I've been following this game for almost 2 years. And Chris, I think you might be considering checking out the game. I don't know if you're going to play the beta. Are you going to play the beta?
No. So I'm incredibly intrigued by Amazon has the backing. So the problem with an MMO as a value proposition in 2021 specifically is that it's not a unique idea. There are a lot of them coming out. There are a lot of expansions coming out. There are a lot of big content patches coming out. And basically, it's all the things that people wanted to release in 2020, plus all the things that people wanted to release in 2021, all coming out together. And there are other games outside the genre that are also making waves. So it is a tough time to come out on its own. And brand new IP also tends to struggle from the fact that they've spent a lot of resources making servers work, testing battle systems, building character creators, building a world, writing initial quests, making all these initial decisions. And so the total quantity of content, because they've had a lot of initial upfront decisions to make, tends to fall short of something from a game that knows what its recipe is and can sit down and just get to work. Endwalker is the result of a bunch of expansions. And so Endwalker will likely have more content as an expansion than all of New World.
Yeah.
And so that's a tough value proposition. But Amazon uniquely has the backing that when they make statements like, we're going to run this thing 5 years regardless of if it loses money, there are only a handful of companies where you're like, you could. Now they could change their mind, but they have the money where you're not like, well, how are you going to do that? If Brian and I are like, we're going to run an MMO, and even if it runs at a loss, we're going to run it full steam for 5 years. No, you are not.
Yeah.
But with Amazon, it's like, what? I mean,
you could.
Yeah. Even if the creative director leaves, they can purchase another one. They have that level of resources available. And so that's incredibly intriguing for an MMO, because that first 5 years is when somebody tries it out, leaves, and then comes back. It is when you establish the loyalty that results in the fact that World of Warcraft still has fans even on its worst days, that Final Fantasy would still have fans even on its worst days. That's earned. Right? They're not playing by the same rules. A bad patch or a bad expansion does not mean death for either one of these games, because they've earned that. New World doesn't have that. And so money is this solution where they're like, you know what, even if it's bad, we're just going to keep it going. We're not going to cancel this. And so I'm intrigued, but I do not go into new IP. I really try to avoid betas and early access, as has been how I've historically done it. Obviously, going full-time in content creation changes all sorts of perspectives as I get further into this. But my plan as of now is to go in on August 31st with everybody else. And if I have a question, I can go to the wiki, or I can ask my good friend Brian.
So that's one of the things that brings up as far as New World itself goes. If you guys haven't seen the engine preview that Square Enix released, I think it was probably about 6 to 9 months ago, and it's just gorgeous. I think what you're actually seeing how that plays out will be in the upcoming Forspoken game in terms of this next gen mind-bending level. And that's the thing that I would say that New World actually has going for it. New World, when you step into it, when you cut down your first tree and the tree actually falls down and thus is no more in the game, and you've actually affected the world in that way, that's all of a sudden how you start to feel like, whoa, there's something here. There's, whether it's, because the challenge that I look at New World is not only is Endwalker coming out you know, 2 months, 3 months after the game officially launches. I mean, September, October, yeah. So roughly less than 3 months. But Endwalkers has that establishment. It's got the story. It's got excitement. It's got consistent. It's got trust. Trust being a real key aspect that Amazon has to work hard to deliver on. And the only way you build that is with time. And the only, like,
Right.
I don't look at, I look at, you talk about 5 years. I was like, yeah, I see 3 years. Like, I see them looking at it and say, in 3 years, we should start to see some kind of return on this massive investment that we've made. And who knows what will succeed.
That doesn't mean in the black. That just means it looks like it's going in a direction that is worth continuing to dump money into it.
Correct. And I think that's the typical standard for business, you know, in that mindset.
That's
so
fair.
same thing with, same thing kind of in that line of 4 years, which essentially then makes it an establishment MMO, which then in my mind, based off of timing, would have it kind of start going toe to toe with Ashes. But when we look at this kind of as a synergy, because originally visually I was like, no, this game doesn't look like it's my kind of game, right? Like it's not my Final Fantasy, which is my primarily MMO experience. But there's something where one of the reasons for this topic is to say, like, is it something where we could see a Final Fantasy player being interested in this game? And I would think it would always just depend on the player. But what say you, Chris?
So I think, first of all, what are the patch cycles? One of the advantages of people who have dabbled in like WoW versus 14 is that they're every other year. And so if you like expansion launches and that's all you like, you can just bounce back and forth. If you like whichever game has the current better rating scheme, you can bounce back and forth. And so you can kind of say, here's what an MMO is, but I'm just going to take the cherries off the top and I'm just going to go, you know, cup to cup to cup, only eating cherries. And it's amazing. And so, you know, it's great to see competition in the space that keeps everybody honest. You know, WoW has for many years, it seems like, ignored competition. And as a result, they haven't really had to be really careful. And so it's kept them from playing basic fundamentals. And so I think 14 has a good value, just base proposition as an MMO. First of all, what's the monetary model shake out to be a New World? Not what is it on launch, not what is it as planned. We look at things like Destiny, where it's like, here's what we launched with, and then here's what we changed to every 30 days.
Yeah.
So I'm not asking today. I'm not asking what will it be. I'm saying, what is 3 years from now when we're saying, hey, it looks like this thing's sticking around? What is that? How often are expansions? How often are patches? What do those include? Not what do we want them to include? What have they included at 3 years? And then how does it fit in with 14? Does it do things that 14 does not do well? Guild Wars has really fun and interesting PvP. And there are people who play Guild Wars not for PvP. There are. Yeah. But as a compromise with 14, as a compatible, you know, partner in crime, I really enjoy popping over to Guild Wars and explicitly doing things that when somebody says, oh, do you do this in 14?
No.
Not that much. So like I spent a ton of time doing jump puzzles. I spent a ton of time doing open world content. I spent a ton of time doing PvP, not because those are the only thing Guild Wars offers, but because Final Fantasy is my primary and Guild Wars is plugging in those areas where Final Fantasy is like, yeah, we have it, but it's not really where we shine.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I think this is a good topic for us as a community, especially that is a very vested Final Fantasy XIV community, isn't to say like, what am I playing on the 19th of November? Endwalker. What am I playing August 31st? Yeah, New World. Like I'm
if you want Brian to play a game, don't release it in the middle of November.
Yeah, like no,
don't do it.
I've already got plans. calendar's already set.
Ashes of Creation is offering to pay you to play their game. When's it released? November 19th. That is unfortunate.
That's unfortunate.
Like I don't know what to tell you.
We're good. We're good. Yeah. It's one of the things that I've actually started saying just from a pride perspective is like we have our link and we've seen I don't have the number in front of me, 8,000 people who've gone from our videos, and we don't even include the link in all of our videos, and gone and started Final Fantasy XIV, which is a lot. We don't get a dime for that. I never said that we don't get a dime for it. I started doing that. People are like, oh, it's like, yeah, like it's not a link that is benefiting me. It's like, go play. I want you to play this game. I want you to experience.
If Square Enix is like, hey, 8,000 people have clicked this link, we would love to buy you two a hamburger. We will take that hamburger.
Hey, I got a salt shaker that I can put a little on those fries. So,
but you know, as a bargaining chip, they're like, well, what if we don't give you a hamburger? Then we're going to keep recommending this game. So like, we don't really have a ton of room to bargain from here because I'm just excited that people are trying 14.
Here's where what I hope for, because we know that right now what they say, like, cause all we have to go off of is what they say. If Yoshi P came out and said X, I believe him because he's delivered, and and I could either factor.
He's earned that.
Yeah, he's
A
earned that level
random
of trust.
guy that has a
Right.
webcam.
Scott comes out and says, hey, like we're a buy-to-play game, so you buy it, subscription. We might have a battle pass later, or we might do this stuff later. All right, we'll have to wait and see. Just so it could be just like Destiny. Like, all right, every year there's their, expansion that you pay for, and you go on and go from there. But what I hope for this is what I hope that within the 14 community, what they can find that's good about it. I'm not expecting like a great story like in Final Fantasy, but I didn't play New World for the story. I play it kind of for the world in and of itself, that experience. I grew up, I was born out in East Texas, Nacogdoches, for anybody who knows the area. Neck of nowhere, all the land of tall women and virgin pines is what somebody told me as an adult, and I thought that was hilarious. But so there's a clear aesthetic that when I stepped into the game, I was like, wow, this feels like my childhood. Like this feels like I'm running around the forest and the moon's breaking through the trees. What I hope for within all games that find success is that what can Final Fantasy XIV learn from New World? And the key aspects that the game already starts to surmise at its core, one of them is housing. I've talked about this numerous times when we talk about 14 housing. And they have housing that exists out actually in the world. There's no instance ward or neighborhood or like private island. No, you go and you see a house, you can buy that house, and then that house becomes instanced to you. And what people see on the outside is a little mini game of people competing for the best decoration of their house. So you get your house is the one that's on display based off of your little, who all owns that specific house's leaderboard, but you will always see your house. Anybody else?
Content creators not rise to the top of that, and how does somebody not rise to the top of that? By trolling. Like, I don't know how far left and right that decorating allows it to go.
I don't know.
And is it is it winner take all, where like the top one just shows to everybody, or is it like
top one?
This
shows
is
to
the
everybody.
percentage of the player population that's going to see it.
Top one shows to everybody. Now I don't think it's voting.
I'm interested to see it.
It's gonna be cool. But if nothing else, like it makes me go, wow, that's actually a really smart idea. Because then there's not a restriction on, you want a house, go get a house,
Go get a house.
And then the housing, and because there's no restriction on that outside of grinding up the money and the
What's a house do for me?
There's benefits, there's bonuses. But here's the kicker. Like, this is where it just gets interesting. And I know people get mad at us when we talk about taxing in 14. Like, there's you actually pay a tax for your house in Final Fantasy 14. It's called your sub fee. And just like Luke said earlier, he lost his house. Like, you're physically paying a tax of real world money.
You really lose a house. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you really want a house, that's what that costs you. But in the game, you don't lose your house in New World. Like, you don't. Like, you buy it, you get it. But if you don't pay the taxes on it, then you lose the bonuses that are associated with that house. And that could be anything from increased experience or, whatever.
Okay, so you lose like your free company buff because your free company hasn't paid the electric company.
Exactly. So it's like, well, pay the electric company, and then buffs are turned on right in there. Axum Jax, yes, freaking SM Fox in chat knows SFA. Axum Jax, baby. That's where I was born. All right. So I think that's something that's really interesting. The just the world itself. Like I was playing the game New World, and I was running around. I go, what would Yoshi P do with this? What could Yoshi P do with this engine, with how this is structured visually? Like, what would he build if he could build like a brand new MMO? It could be based off of 14. Like we talk about 14 7.0 or what,
I love Shadowland zones. I think they're beautiful. I love, especially like Ardenweld's, the way light filters is amazing. I think the zones in Shadowbringers are stunning. Spending time in Raktika or what is just amazing. The Tempest just has such an emotional connection, and I dig it. But when I play Guild Wars in PSO2, even though I'm not as connected to those zones, even though their significance to me is not as heavy because I'm not as invested in those franchises, I find myself wanting to spend time out in the world that I simply don't when I'm playing WoW in 14. And so if New World could put yet one more set of inspirations out there for ideas where Yoshi P could say, I don't want to do that exactly.
Right.
But, the sort of things that inspire changes like bicolor gemstones, the sort of things that inspire, what if, Mr. Happy asked Yoshi P, well, could we get critical engagements out in open world zones? how would that work? How would that function? Do we have that capability? Is that something you guys have even thought of? And so open world content, I think, is an incredible area that the genre could do a better job inviting more views on. There are already games that do it, but there are games that don't, which means it's clearly not a solved feature.
And you're 100% right. I don't think New World's really going to pull away the Final Fantasy audience. I mean, there's going to be some who play both. You know, like I've always asked, what's your home MMO? Mine's Final Fantasy. I don't know if New World's going to become a new home, you know, because it's really hard to play more than like one MMO seriously because of the vast amount of content. With 14 and me, like I've gotten everything capped. So I'm like, yep, I'm ready to go for Endwalker. And now I'm just kind of like playing the game, just kind of doing the fun stuff, just kind of like picking something new to grind on. New World's going to offer obviously a new leveling, a new experience. But, you know, I really hope that it's successful. I think that it's going to be interesting.
You're
but
established.
I think
you could afford a vacation home within the MMO space.
Yeah,
you could have somewhere you could dip away to the weekend. Your house is you're metaphorically paid off, and you've got some housekeepers that come in and keep it clean. You've got everything's to cap. You've cleared all your story. You've done a lot of what you want to do.
It only took 11 years, you know.
But it would be easy to spend a weekend away.
Yeah,
you know, you can come back. It'll be here.
So, but on that same kind of vein, like with New World and with Final Fantasy, like, yeah, I hope that it's something where, honestly, I really am excited about just kind of gathering and crafting in that game because it has a player-driven economy. You know, I'm just kind of like, yeah, maybe I just set up a shop and maybe I just kind of hop on a little bit for those really chill streams, you know, fishing and crafting and gathering and then all of a sudden going and buying the best gear in the game because guess what? That's a player-driven economy. That's how that works. Like I just made a lot of money. I sold a lot of cool stuff. Chopped down a lot of trees, man. Chopped down a lot of trees. Living out that Axum Jacks lifestyle and things like that. But any final thoughts on New World and Final Fantasy XIV?
No, I think it's great. I think new MMOs is great. Even if we don't have time for it, it can still inspire the space. Yoshpi recently even, you know, kind of went over in an interview that any game he and his devs don't get to directly, he has people on his team whose explicit job is to come back and report to them, hey, here's what I'm seeing out in the space. Right. Not just from one or two names, but like the space, right? There are many MMOs that are doing something well, maybe doing several things well, maybe doing several things just new. It's not necessarily good or bad. It's just, hey, we haven't seen this quite like this before. This is an indie dev clearly trying to make their mark.
Yeah.
You know, and so he wasn't clear on what games made that list and are they limited to MMORPGs. But anybody that can come into the space and kind of shake things up, I think is good for the space. And I'm excited to see Amazon throw a hat in the ring. They don't have a track record that shows that they've quite mastered making games yet.
Right.
But I wish them the best.
And James asks, as a follow-up before we move into our Guild Wars 2 discussion, so New World is like EVE Online, player-based economy. Yes, there are things that you can get from dungeons, but they are mostly bind on equip so that you can trade and crafters can gather and, fix gems and do all kinds of different things like that. So, yeah, as long as they keep up with that model, I'll be pretty excited overall in the long run for the game itself.